Greenville was the kind of town where porch swings creaked more than sirens wailed, and where the most pressing drama was whether Mrs. Halberton's peach cobbler would win the summer bake-off for a fifth year in a row. It was quiet, predictable, familiar. That's why Grace Mitchell loved it. She had grown up among these cracked sidewalks and slow afternoons. Now 20, a sophomore in sociology at a nearby college, she was back home for spring break. And more than anything, she was looking forward to her favorite tradition, Friday night movie marathons with her dad. Popcorn, caramel flavor only. Don't you dare bring that kettle corn again. Her father had warned with mock sternness that morning, standing in the kitchen in a threadbare t-shirt that still clung to his military posture. Grace laughed. "Yes, Sergeant Mitchell, sir. Caramel, got it." He smirked. "You're lucky I'm retired. Otherwise, I'd court-martial you over that sweet and salty disaster." Grace rolled her eyes, kissed his cheek, and grabbed the grocery list. It was a short one: popcorn, soda, some strawberries if they looked good, and the chocolate ice cream she always pretended was just for him. She stepped out into the sun, unaware that the world had quietly moved a domino piece without her consent. The corner market was only a few blocks away, nestled between a thrift store and an old barber shop that still charged $8 for a haircut. Grace parked her car, music humming low, and walked in with the ease of someone who had never needed to be afraid here. Inside, she smiled at the cashier, waved at a woman who had once been her babysitter, and wandered toward the snack aisle humming softly. She was dressed casually, jeans, a denim jacket, hair tied in a loose bun. Her hands moved confidently. Her posture? Relaxed but alert. She never saw the patrol car pull up. Outside, Officer Kyle Rendell stepped out of his cruiser like he owned every inch of concrete beneath him. He had been transferred from a larger department in the city after a string of incidents that never seemed to make it past internal review. Here in Greenville, he was the new authority figure, the enforcer who believed that control was best maintained through intimidation. He spotted Grace through the glass, a young black woman, alone, holding a phone and a bag of snacks. His mind filled in a story that had no basis in reality: suspicion, defiance, threat. Grace didn't notice him until she stepped back outside. "Excuse me," Rendell barked, stepping into her path. "Need to see some ID." She blinked, startled. "I'm sorry." "You heard me. What are you doing out here?" "I just bought groceries. I live a few blocks away." "Don't get smart. What's your name?" Grace's smile faded. "Grace Mitchell." "You got a license on you, Grace?" "Officer, with respect, am I being detained?" That question, simple and constitutional, was gasoline on dry leaves. Rendell's face tightened. He reached for her phone. "Hey, don't touch my phone." Too late, he slapped it from her hand. It whacked against the pavement. "You just resisted a lawful order," he snapped. "I didn't do anything," she said, stepping back, voice shaming. "You're hurting me." Without another word, Rendell raised his hand and punched her hard across the mouth. Grace fell. Her head hit the edge of the curb. Blood smeared her chin, and everything went silent. A teenage boy nearby dropped his slushie. A mother screamed. Someone grabbed a phone and started recording. Grace lay still, eyes blinking, trying to breathe past the ringing in her ears. Then she whispered, barely audible, "Call my dad." The boy who had seen it all knelt beside her and asked shakily, "Who is he?" She licked blood from her lip, her voice hoarse. "Elias. Elias Mitchell." The boy's eyes widened. "The army guy." She nodded and then closed her eyes. He reached for his phone, trembling now, not from shock, but from understanding. The cop didn't just punch a girl today. He punched the daughter of a man trained to bring down warlords with his bare hands. And that man was already on his way. The hum of the dishwasher filled the small kitchen. mingling with the faint crackle of a vinyl record playing something smooth and slow. Elias Mitchell stood at the counter, chopping onions with military precision, his thoughts far from war or politics or the world outside. Tonight was about movies, caramel popcorn, and being a dad, not a soldier. Then the phone rang. He wiped his hands on a towel, not rushing, not suspecting. He glanced at the screen, an unknown number. Normally he wouldn't answer, but something twitched in his gut. That old instinct. He picked it up. Hello. A young voice, rushed, shaky, spilled through the line. Sir, Mr. Mitchell, your daughter, Grace, she's been hurt by a cop. Elias didn't move, not even a breath. The voice kept going. She's outside the Market Plus on Marlowe Street. The officer punched her unprovoked. I saw it. I'm sending you the video now. There was a pause. Sir, are you still there? Elias's voice came out low, like thunder building behind mountains. I'm on my way. He didn't hang up. He pressed the red button, moved to the living room like a current of pressure, grabbed his keys, his coat, his military ID, though he didn't know why. It just felt necessary. The knife was still on the counter. The record kept playing. He drove fast, but not recklessly, controlled, steady. His mind wasn't flooded with panic. That wasn't how he was wired. What coursed through his veins wasn't fear, it was clarity. And something else, something cold. At the scene, the crowd had grown. Several people stood frozen with their phones still out, unsure if the worst was over or just beginning. Grace sat on the ground, leaning against the front of a parked car. Her lip was split. Her left cheek was swelling. Her denim jacket had a rip on the sleeve where she'd fallen. But her eyes, still alert, still fire. Officer Kyle Rendell stood several feet away, arms folded, posturing for the gathering phones like he was somehow the victim here. Back it up, folks. She was non-compliant. End of story. A murmur rose, anger, disbelief. Then a low voice cut through the tension. Is this the man? Rendell turned. Elias Mitchell stood at the edge of the crowd, his face expressionless. Still, but the kind of stillness that makes nature pause. Grace looked up. Dad. He didn't move toward her, not yet. He stared at Rendell. Did you hit her? Rendell straightened. This is an active investigation. You need to back away. That's not what I asked. She was resisting. You weren't here. You don't. Elias walked forward, not rushed, not violent, but unstoppable. I'm her father. I don't care who you are, sir. She's 20 years old, 5'6", 120 pounds. Rendell's jaw tensed. She had groceries in her hand, Elias continued. Not a weapon. You couldn't de-escalate. This is police business. Step back or I'll... Elias finally stopped, inches away. Rendell went to grab his baton. Too slow. Elias caught the motion midair. Didn't yank it, didn't twist, just held it. And said, if you touch her again, you won't walk away. Someone gasped, not because of what Elias did, but because of the look in his eyes. Not rage, not bluster, just pure, trained discipline. Elias wasn't bluffing. He wasn't threatening to go viral. He was stating a fact like gravity, like war. Rendell stepped back. His hands were now trembling slightly, and that's when the sheriff's SUV pulled in. Lights flashing. Deputy Tanya Fields, an older black woman with 30 years on the force, stepped out. She assessed the scene quickly. Then her eyes landed on Grace, then Elias, then Rendell. Someone wants to tell me what happened? She asked, calm but deadly serious. Everyone tried to speak at once, except Elias. He bent down finally to Grace. His hand touched her cheek with the tenderness of a father who'd seen too much blood in his life. and never wanted to see it again on someone he loved. "I'm okay," she whispered. "No," he said, "but you will be." And then he stood, turned to the deputy, and handed her the phone the boy had given him. "Start here." The deputy took one look at the video, her face changed, and everything else followed. By the time the sun dipped beneath the skyline of Greenville, the incident was no longer a local event. It had become a spark. The video, only 38 seconds long, spread like gasoline-licking flame. The frame was slightly shaky, but clear enough to capture the truth. Officer Kyle Rendell striking a young black woman across the face, knocking her backward, then standing over her like nothing had happened. It had no music, no voiceover, no edits, but it needed none. The truth was uncut, and the internet was unforgiving. By nightfall, hashtags had begun to form. #Justice for Grace at hands of barred daughters. Greenville Punch. The sheriff's office issued a brief statement. An internal investigation is underway. Officer Rendell has been placed on administrative leave pending review. But to Grace Mitchell, lying on her bed with gauze pressed against her jaw, that statement rang hollow. Her father sat across the room, silent, arms crossed. He hadn't changed out of the jacket he wore earlier. The lines on his face were deeper than usual. Not from age, but from restraint. Grace broke the silence first. "Dad, I'm sorry." Elias looked up sharply. "For what?" "I didn't mean to draw attention or make it worse." His voice dropped to a hush, stern but not unkind. "Grace, you didn't make this happen." "He did." She looked away, chewing the inside of her cheek. "People are saying I should have just complied, that I escalated it. People say a lot of things when they're afraid of looking at the truth." Across town at the community center, a group of college students and local activists had gathered. Not to riot, not to protest violently, but to speak and to plan. One of them, a soft-spoken woman named Lena Ortiz, stood at the podium, clutching a printout of the video frame showing Grace mid-fall. "I've lived in this town my whole life," Lena said. "I've seen the slow erosion of decency under the guise of order. But what happened to Grace? That was a crack in the mask." A voice from the back called out, "What do we do now?" Lena looked down at the photo again. "We stand beside her. We show the world that the quiet ones won't stay quiet forever." Meanwhile, Officer Rendell sat alone at a bar 2 counties away, eyes glued to his phone. Every news network had picked up the story. His name, his badge number, his smirk. The bartender set down a glass of water beside him. "You messed up," the man muttered. Rendell didn't look up. He was too busy scrolling through death threats, calls for resignation, and memes turning him into the face of unchecked force. For the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar. Not fear, exposure. The next morning, Elias took a slow walk through the center of town. His boots hit the pavement like soft thunder. People parted for him, not out of fear, but reverence. His face was now etched into the local conscience, like a monument that had been there all along, just waiting to be seen. Outside the post office, a man in a gray suit approached. "Councilman Harris." "Elias," he said cautiously, "the mayor would like to invite you and your daughter to speak at the town hall this Friday." Elias studied the man's polished shoes before looking him in the eye. "And why is that?" "To help calm the community. Restore faith. You know?" Elias held his gaze a moment longer. "If you want calm, fix the system. If you want faith, earn it." He walked away before Harris could respond. Back at home, Grace was sitting by the window, reading comments from strangers online. Some hateful, most supportive, all overwhelming. Elias returned and sat beside her. "You don't have to speak if you don't want to," he said gently. "This isn't your burden to fix." Grace closed the laptop. "But maybe it's mine to name." He nodded. And for the first time since the incident, she saw it, the pride in his eyes. Not because she was strong, but because she was willing to be seen, even when bruised. That evening, Elias opened an old drawer he hadn't touched in years. Inside, an envelope marked declassified, a badge from his Delta Force days, a photo of a younger Grace sitting on his shoulders, arms wide like wings. He stared at it, then whispered, "This fight's not over." Friday arrived beneath a pale, cloudless sky, one of those days that felt suspended in time, like the world itself was holding its breath. Greenville's town hall, usually half empty for zoning meetings and budget talks, was packed wall to wall. Reporters lined the back, students lined the front, town elders filled the benches. People who had never been politically active now sat upright, hearts clutched tight in their chests. They weren't here for statistics. They were here for Grace Mitchell and the man who raised her. Elias and Grace entered the building not as protesters, not as victims, but with something rare. Dignity that didn't need to shout. Elias wore a navy blazer, faded at the shoulders but crisp. Grace, though still bearing faint bruises on her cheek, wore a simple white blouse, clean, quiet, and defiant in its own right. When they stepped up to the podium, the room fell still. No gavel needed, no command for silence. Elias nodded to his daughter and stepped back, letting her speak first. Grace looked over the crowd. Her voice, when it came, wasn't theatrical or loud, but clear enough to cut through doubt. "Last week I went to buy caramel popcorn. That was the plan. That's all. I didn't expect to be questioned, grabbed, or hit. I didn't expect to be thrown to the ground because someone thought I didn't look like I belonged." She paused. A hush rippled through the room. "I'm not here today to ask for sympathy," she continued. "I'm here to remind you that what happened to me has happened before, to people without cameras, without fathers who were trained to break men like sticks." Her eyes flicked toward the front row where Councilman Harris sat unblinking. "I got back up. But a system where someone like Officer Rendell can operate unchecked, that's what scares me more than bruises." She took a breath. "And to the people saying I should have stayed quiet or complied or behaved differently, I ask you this. What should a woman do when someone decides she's guilty before she's even spoken?" The silence that followed was thick, not from discomfort, but revelation. Then Elias stepped forward. He didn't speak for several seconds. He looked across the room slowly, not at the crowd, but through them, like he was measuring the weight of each soul present. "When I served," he began, "we had a rule. You don't strike unless you are ready to answer for it." He glanced toward Sheriff Tanya Fields, who gave a solemn nod. "But it seems in this country," Elias continued, "some wear a badge thinking it shields them from consequence, that they can strike and call it protocol." He looked at Grace, then back at the room. "I didn't raise my daughter to be afraid. And I didn't serve this country to come home and watch its peacekeepers become aggressors." He stepped back, letting the words hang, and the entire room stood. A standing ovation, but not the kind filled with claps and whoops. Silent, still, reverent, as if to say, "We heard you." Afterward, as the crowd began to disperse, a young white woman in her 20s approached Grace near the exit. "My sister, she was hurt by an officer 2 years ago," she whispered. "We didn't have video. We didn't even know how to fight it." Grace took her hand gently. "I'm sorry." "No, thank you," the woman said, "because now they can't look away." Just outside, Elias stood beside the stone steps, watching the sunset paint long shadows across the sidewalk. A little boy approached him, a stranger, no older than 8. "Are you the soldier?" he asked. Elias knelt. "I used to be." The boy hesitated. "Are you still scary?" Elias smiled. "Only to people who hurt others." The boy grinned and ran back to his mother. Back home that evening, the porch light flicked on automatically. Elias sat on the porch swing with a fresh bag of caramel popcorn and a blanket draped across his lap. Grace joined him, her head resting gently against his shoulder. No words were needed, only quiet, and the knowledge that, for once, justice had not been silenced. 2 weeks later, the Greenville Police Department held a press conference. The podium was crowded with microphones. The air bristled with anticipation, half apology, half damage control. Sheriff Tanya Fields stepped forward with a firmness that silenced reporters before she even spoke. After thorough review, including multiple video submissions and eyewitness testimonies, Officer Kyle Rendell has been formally terminated from his position, she said. Murmurs rippled through the room. This department will also undergo mandatory de-escalation and bias training, effective immediately. An external oversight committee is being formed with citizen representation. One reporter raised a hand. Was this decision influenced by public pressure? Sheriff Fields didn't flinch. It was influenced by evidence and by conscience. That was the end of her statement, but it wasn't the end of the story. Officer Rendell didn't walk out the back door. He didn't disappear quietly into retirement. In a rare move, he was charged with excessive force under state law. Body cam footage, witness testimony, and the public video formed a case too strong to bury. Grace Mitchell didn't attend the court hearings. She didn't need to. Her silence was already louder than his badge. What she did do was accept an invitation from the State University's Department of Criminal Justice. They asked her to guest lecture on her experience not just as a victim, but as a voice. Elias went with her, sitting in the back row, arms folded, not to protect her, but to witness her strength from a distance. She spoke, her face healed, her presence unshaken. I don't believe every officer is a monster, she said to the students. But if the system protects the ones who are, then silence is complicity. We don't just need new policies, we need a new culture. A young black student raised his hand. Do you think change is possible? Grace's answer was quiet. Yes, because I'm standing here, and my father didn't burn the town down when he could have. He taught me that justice doesn't always wear a uniform or hold a gavel. Sometimes it just holds its ground. Meanwhile, Elias Mitchell was approached by several community leaders to join the newly formed Civilian Oversight Board. He politely declined. I've done my fighting, he said. Now it's your turn. But he did leave them with a binder, meticulously organized. Inside, tactical reform suggestions, psychological screening recommendations, community policing models from his time overseas. It wasn't rage, it was the strategy. The story faded from national headlines after a few weeks, as they always do. But something strange happened in Greenville. People remembered. Teachers rewrote civics lessons. Church sermons mentioned bias and courage in the same breath. Local kids now walked past murals where Grace's face stood beside words that read, "Strength isn't always loud, but it always stands." And perhaps the most unexpected change happened quietly, at the police academy's next graduation. A folded note was left in each cadet's locker. No name, no logo. It simply read, "The badge doesn't make you strong. Restraint does. Respect does. Accountability does. Choose wisely." Rumor had it Elias wrote it. He never confirmed that. 1 month later, Grace and Elias walked past the market where everything had happened. She stopped, looking at the sidewalk. The crack where her head had landed had been filled in, but she still saw it. He touched her shoulder gently. "You okay?" She nodded. "I was thinking." "Yeah. Even when it's over, it's never really over, is it?" He looked out at the street. "No, but that's not always bad." They stood there a while longer and then walked home side by side. Moral of the story, there are moments when silence becomes violence, and other times when silence becomes resistance. Grace Mitchell didn't yell. She didn't riot. She didn't burn. She stood. And because she stood, others stood with her. Elias Mitchell didn't lash out. He didn't seek revenge. He sought something harder: justice without destruction. The real power in this story is the strength of fists, but the strength of restraint. Not in running away, but in choosing where to stand. Because sometimes the loudest revolution starts with a whisper: "You hurt the wrong one." And in that moment, the system begins to answer for itself.